Hello, good morning, and welcome to another episode of Psyched. I'm your host, Sule A. Joseph, a counseling psychologist by profession. Today, I have a season-ending episode for you guys, a conversation that will go in depth into a topic I'm not sure is controversial, but definitely sometimes is overlooked in this environment and atmosphere where we talk about crime and criminality and children having behavioral problems and issues in schools, especially coming off the back of all of these issues in schools pertaining to bomb threats and so on. We are going to take a deep dive into that conversation today. But first, my favorite segment, Psyched to Know.
Psyched to Know, brought to you by Sule Joseph and Associates.
TNT is reported to have a high literacy rate of 96.9%, according to UNESCO in 1990, with other sources going as high as 98.97%. However, in 2015, a survey conducted by UE showed that 22 to 23% of people in TNT over the age of 15 were unable to cope with everyday reading. This was supported by evaluations done by PISA, the Program for International Student Assessment, where 46% of 15-year-old students had low performance in reading to the extent that they could not identify the main idea of a text. And TNT was shown in the Progress in International Reading Literacy study that 80% of Standard 3 students were below low-end international benchmarks, meaning they were not educated to a basic level of reading.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
The best for your baby is at dbesttoys.com. We have the best strollers, car seats, walkers, feeding accessories, playpens, cribs, clothing, and the widest range of brand name toys like Barbie, Hot Wheels, Nerf, LOL, Fisher-Price, Cocomelon, Intex Pools, Amazon Fire tablets, HP and Gateway laptops, and the best bikes, scooters, skateboards, and ride-on. Visit us in-store at 7 Main Road, MacBean, or shop online now at dbesttoys.com. That's dbesttoys.com. We have the best toys at the best prices.
Welcome back. I'm your host, Sule A. Joseph, and you are looking at Psyched. Well, this next guest, you all have asked for. You all have bombarded me on social media. You all have messaged on my phone. You all have constantly sent me texts, emails, and so forth to invite this next guest. Who am I talking about? Who could be this potential guest? Of course, I'm speaking about none other than Dr. Wynette Joseph, a.k.a. a.k.a. my mother, a.k.a. the grandchildren demander, right? Thanks for joining me this morning, Dr. Wynette Joseph.
Thank you for having me, Sule.
All right. We want to have a conversation about literacy. Because we know when we talk about literacy, at least I only found out recently, when we talk about literacy, we mean more than one thing. Mm-hmm. When we think of literacy, maybe the person just can't read and write. That is it. But when we talk about literacy, what are we talking about?
When we speak of literacy, we are talking about listening, speaking, reading, and writing, and its interrelatedness. Broadly, that is literacy. Coming out of that one, there is reading literacy.
So if I can't talk good, I'm illiterate.
In terms of speaking, yes.
I'm speechified. I'm speechified illiterate. All right. Okay. So you can. So it's more. So being illiterate is more than just not being able to write or to read.
Yes, you're quite correct.
Okay. I just wanted to get that point. Okay. All right. So today we're having a conversation about reading literacy. Okay. Now, one of the things I wanted to set on the table is that we often have and see a linkage between children who can't read, can't write, or maybe they might be able to mimic symbols, but they don't understand the symbols that they put down on paper, pen to paper. So functionally then, reading and writing illiterate.
Okay.
Now, we often see a link between that and behavioral problems in the school. And I know you're not a psychologist, but you would have spent many... You're handsome, son. You're handsome, son. Now, you would have spent many years as a teacher within the school system. What are your thoughts on that? What do you think might make that connection?
I want to go back a bit to clarify when we say reading, what we mean, and for folks to understand that reading does not happen by osmosis. It has to be taught, first of all. And so when we look at reading, reading consists of several components: phonemic awareness. What does it sound like? Phonics, what's that relationship between the sound and the symbol? What about the vocabulary? What do the words mean? And fluency. Can the child read with prosody and so on? And
with who?
With prosody.
I didn't grow up with that person.
That is with diction and that sort of thing. Right. So you look at that, and then of course you have comprehension, which is what you are referring to, because comprehension is really the objective behind reading. It's the purpose for reading, in order to understand the message on the paper and then to be able to take action. So that we find in the classroom that there are some children who can do some aspect of the reading, but they cannot totally read, because their weakness lies in the comprehension. And that's important, because it's the comprehension that will guide their actions. See the actions that are happening out there?
So that's why now I'm trying to formulate. How can we then find a linkage? If we say, the child who can't read in school, what do they do in class? Because how do you follow? Good. If your comprehension is poor, if you can't read and you can't understand what the information that you're taking in, how do you then follow in class? What do you do?
Well, first of all, some children work in groups, so they are able to hide. Then if the classrooms are pretty large, teachers could miss some of these students. Yes? But what many of them do is just misbehave. And so that the teacher now will say, you're giving trouble, come step out of the class, or, stand in the back, or, remove the child from the classroom. And so the child is now happy because nobody will find out that I can't read. So quite often, a lot of the misbehavior in the classroom is really the child crying out for help, help, I can't read. And so they misbehave. They become the class clown and so on.
Well, let's be fair to the teachers in the school system. We have classes, and for those of persons who are looking on who might be teachers or work within a school system, you know what I'm talking about. We have classes that are overpacked, 40 plus children in a class. This one child, most likely, will not be the only child who has these issues and disciplinary and behavioral challenges and so on. So it's easy for a teacher to miss this one child. It's also harder for the teacher to tolerate this behavior when they have several other students who also need their attention. So it's easy for this child then to slip through the cracks.
Yes, it is.
Should it still then be just the teacher's responsibility?
No, it's not. There are several causative factors when a child is having a reading issue. It's the home, it's the school, and it's the child. So we can't really put the blame at the feet of any one person, because the child can have reading issues, auditory, visual, and so on. Just being able to sit still for 10 minutes, some children can't do that.
I feel like you're throwing that for me, but all right, but all right, go ahead.
Yes, and sometimes it's the problem within the school itself.
Right.
I'm not throwing this out to any school, but sometimes a school does not have a philosophy for reading. A school does not push the reading and make it, front burner issue. Because sometimes teachers say, I'm too busy teaching the math and the science, I can't teach the reading. But reading underpins the curriculum. And so that the teacher has to find a way to integrate the reading across the curriculum. So teachers can have maybe a little library corner, book exchange, they can do stuff online. Teachers can just read aloud to children every day. That will help their vocabulary, their sense of story, writing, and all those good things. So that the issue is there too. Teachers have to be enthusiastic, and I know the environment is not one that will encourage teachers to be enthusiastic, but such is the nature of the job.
I feel like that was a slight dig there somewhere, but all right.
Such is the nature of the job. And so the parent has a big role to play. Because I'm just thinking, if as a parent, rather than give my child a box of some favorite fast food as a gift, birthday gift or so, if at age 1 a child gets 1 book and at age 2, 2 books, by the time that child enters primary school, the child would have been exposed to a number of books. And so parents can do those things, the newspaper, parents can just have conversation with the children because it's the language, all of it is language related. And so that the child who enters school with more language already has a foot up the ladder.
But then we also exist in an environment, in the school environment, that is very heavily focused or exam oriented. So when children enter into primary school, the focus automatically is exam after exam and then preparation for SEA, which is an exam to leave and then to enter into secondary school. And then they enter into secondary school and then they're on another track for a race again to prepare them for exams. So when you are on a track to prepare for exams, how do we fit in time to prioritize these things for the odd child who may be taking longer than the other children to pick up this skill that everybody seems to adopt so easily? So what is this child's problem?
Differentiated instruction is the answer. So that, again, it's asking a lot of the classroom teacher, and I'm not going down that road, but it would help if we had an extra teacher in the classroom. And that exists in some schools. Okay, so that while the classroom teacher is dealing with the general population, as it were, this assistant teacher is able to deal with the child or children with additional problems. So really what we need to have is like maybe a 3-tier system. So those who really get it in the first tier, those who need a little help in the second tier, and those who are really in need of, I don't want to say remediation, but intervention, they are in the 3rd tier. And so if the classroom teacher has assistance, it would allow her to do that. But such is not the case in every school.
Do you feel as though we put the requisite support or importance on reading, especially at a primary level? Because if we look at SEA is supposed to test the basics to ensure that you have the basic skills, but then we also have no child left behind. So if you're able to just pen 3 lines or something, then you're going to be placed in...
That's not entirely true. No, not entirely true. Children have to write an essay, either a letter, or they have to write about an incident they have observed, or they have to write a story. So they do have to write, and they have to show that they can use the writing process. So it's not as if they're going to memorize a passage and just write it. Right. Okay? But
so then how do we end up with children in secondary school who can't read or write?
You're asking a very tricky question there.
So this system accurately strains and regulates which children can actively or do actively have these skills. How do we end up with children in secondary school, and quite a few of them?
Well, there are different types of tests, and so if we are looking to see children who score below or above, that's a different kind of test. If we are going to just place children, well, that's another kind of test. And so maybe you need to speak to someone who deals with common entrance and the C exam and placing of children.
Finished a long time. It's a long time ago.
I'm from long time. I'm from long time.
You are showing your age. Your age is showing.
I'm from long time.
But yes, because that leads me directly into another concern. I've had a client who has made it all the way to Form 5, and this particular client could not read nor write, nor count past a certain number.
The school needs to really be able to monitor and keep records, and record keeping is not always done, because that really shouldn't happen. It really shouldn't happen, and it's an abuse of the child. So that at some point along the line, someone should have picked up this child really needs intervention. And I'm sorry to hear that, because it means that did not happen. See? And I guess you may be wondering, how early should the intervention start?
That's the next question. So the next question, of course, is, how do if my child can't read or does not speak at 5, should I be allowed? Because generally, you have children might start saying little words maybe by 2, 2.5 or so. But if at 5 my child is not reading and writing at 5, should I be worried?
There are benchmarks for each age group. So I'm saying if at 5 my child is not reading, and by reading I guess you mean calling words, I won't panic too much. I would pay attention to what's happening, but I won't panic. But if the child gets to standard 2, 1, 2, and still nothing is happening, you need to be concerned.
So by,
and the earlier it's
7,
done,
8, if the child has
8 is late. 8 is late. 6, 7, cut off there. Because the truth is, the earlier the intervention is done, the greater the results.
So even for us, as psychologists, when we do psychometric testing or psychological assessments, psychoeducational assessments particularly, with children, the earliest we will take a child to do a psychoeducational assessment is age 6. Because at age 6, we expect at least there'll be certain skills that we can check for, and certain markers. We'll expect certain reading skills and so on or whatever. And if we don't see those skills, it's not an alarm necessarily. We can say it's a delayed developmental issue and we want to pay attention to so on, whatever.
You pay attention,
so,
but you...
Right. So for us, usually it's by age 6. So by age 6. Before that, we don't really do any psychoeducational assessment.
It's difficult to test what has not been taught. So that, 6, 7, time to take a look at that child.
Now, there are some children, for example, it's often said that Albert Einstein, for those of you at home who know Albert Einstein, a little known gentleman who came up with the theory of relativity and the like, supposed to be the smartest man among us who ever lived, he reportedly started speaking at age 7. So he was a late speaker.
He was a late speaker, and we have children who develop late. So you'll always have outliers, but I can't speak to the outliers. I can only speak to those, to the general group. You understand? So that
so your child 5 can't speak, don't panic. Your child 7, 8 can't speak, panic. Run around like a mad person.
I never said so, because we want the language to be developed early, 6 months, 7 months. There are some children who spoke before they were 6 months. Do you know that?
Who wasn't with that?
And they have not stopped speaking since.
Again, I feel attacked. I feel attacked by this information. All right,
so that So parents, if you see your children by standard 1, you will notice that simple words, what we call basic sight words, those are the words that don't...
So what do they look out for? What do they look out for if our parents look out for?
So your child is unable to recognize little words, the, is, and so on. You begin to, come on, you've been seeing that word several times in school and so on. So if I give you the newspaper and I give you a crayon, you should be able to find some of these words and circle them or what have you, color them or something. And if you see your child second year and can't do this, okay, alarm bells are beginning to go off. By standard 1 year, he needs help. He needs intervention.
We have been able to identify these are what some of the issues are by some of these markers that you've given us. But when we find out, okay, we've checked these boxes, something is strange, what do we do next? Do we throw this child away and try for a new one? We try to get a smarter child? What do we do?
That was an idea, but
Mother, you say you were planning to throw me away? Is that what you're saying? That's what?
Oh gosh.
Do I need to call for security to have you escorted out?
Yeah, but what I'm to get to your question, what does the parent do?
Yeah, what do you do?
What does the parent do? That's a good question, because there is assessment available, and I'm not going down that road through the Ministry of Education, but teachers are really concerned about their children, and the average teacher is really very caring. And as you said, overburdened. And I think if a parent goes into the school, because there has to be this kind of synergy. If the parent goes into the school and, expresses her concern that the child is not performing as he should, and expresses to the teacher, look, I am willing to do my part. What can I do to help? I don't think there's a teacher who would turn that parent away. And I think between the parent and the teacher, they can work around that issue with the child.
No, and that is in the instance if the parent has the capacity, because in the instance where I got the client who made it all the way out to the end of school, formal schooling for us in Trinidad and Tobago, meeting the parent too was challenged. The parent had difficulty reading and writing and communicating. Yes, so the parent seemed challenged.
It happens.
So the parent was challenged, the child was then challenged, and then in speaking with the parent, I asked the parent if there was another parent who could attend. The parent said, no, it's better you talk to me because the other parent, they're real slow. And I just thought, oh gosh. At this moment I said, this child started with a disadvantage.
Yes.
Because clearly both parents are very challenged. This child does not have an environment to learn basic skills, and they too seemed a bit challenged.
So I'm saying that yes, there are markers, and again I bring it back to the school. I'm saying if in the school environment this is picked up early, then the teacher, and if the parent is able to, can work on that issue. It's the school. The school's business is to teach. The parents must support. The school's business is to teach.
So, but is there no responsibility on the parent to teach as well?
Sometimes the parents teach the wrong thing, right?
Oh, I know this. This one I know. This one I know.
Sometimes the parents teach the wrong thing, or the parent might teach it the way they were taught hundreds of years ago. So that, but yes, there is a role for the parent to play, but I'm saying there must be this conferencing between the parent and the teacher.
So then working with this child first requires identifying what some of the markers might be.
Yes.
So the person who's identifying needs to first recognize where this child ought to be from where they aren't.
Yes.
Now what if, in doing that, recognizing something seems off here, and I'm going to use Trinidad and Tobago, I'm going to use me as an example. I like to use myself. Let me use me as an example instead of calling anybody else out. But when I was in primary school, I took an inordinately long time to transcribe from the board to my copybook.
And so your mother?
You stop this. So I took a very long time to transcribe the information that was written on the board down to my copybook. Class would end, I had a lot of trouble with that. And the teachers couldn't figure out, they just figured out I was lazy, it was taking too long and so on. And eventually I think what happened was we had to go and get my eyes tested. And recognize that besides a myriad of other possible issues as well, my vision was a problem. And so it wasn't the teachers who picked that up. The teachers just assumed, listen, I've been delayed, I've taken too long, and so on and whatever. And the teachers themselves were overwhelmed as well. So it was my very observative mother who was able to pick up that perhaps I need to get my eyes tested. And so that is what, but what happens when the parents don't know better? And the school environment is challenged, the staff, too many students, or you're in a school that pushes academic excellence.
So now that explains why children fall through the crack, because I have no other answer for you.
Yeah, what happens? Because the parents don't know how to identify these signs, and the school is too busy basically pushing children academically to try to make it to the exam so that the school gets a good rating for passes and so on.
Yeah.
What happens to the children who are having challenges?
So I go back to the philosophy of the school. What's the purpose of the school? Why is the school there? And so that requires the individual school, principal, staff, to sit down and think of, why are we here? What are we doing here with these children who pass through our hands every day? And I think once there's an agreed statement, a philosophy, if you will, for the school, then the children are going to benefit, but that does not always happen. That is in the ideal world. But indeed, some children do, unfortunately, fall through the cracks. That's the truth.
So we've identified maybe where some cracks are. We've looked at where we should identify when children may have issues and so on. We've said, what do we do when we recognize that they do have issues? Have parents working partnership with the school to find better ways to be able to work with the child.
And the ministry also provides some services for the students.
Okay. So, well, when I'm saying school here, I'm using school, but covering the entire ministry as well, right? To working along with the parents to find solutions to whatever these challenges and so are. Good. So we've done that. We've worked along with the parent. We've identified where some challenges, and we still continue to have issues with this child in terms of the child's ability to read and write, literacy challenges. What do we do then?
Well, it would
What's
seem that
next for this child?
What's next for that child? Specialist assistance, perhaps beyond what the school is able to give. And there are private institutions that, and I'm not here to advertise for anyone, there are private institutions that offer specialist attention.
Because we have children where schools feel as though the teachers went all out of the way, did everything they could do. And the parents feel frustrated because they are trying on their end and doing everything that they can do. And what we do instead is we leave them in the system as is.
No, we shouldn't.
And so these are the children, in my experience, humbly, that tend to get targeted by the gangs. These are the children who get targeted by being idle hands and out of the classroom often because they don't want to be picked on because they often don't have the answers. They can't read, they can't recognize things. They're out of class regularly. They tend to end up being out of school. They tend to drop out of school. They tend to be the ones leaving school without a full certificate, without 5 basic passes and so on. Those sorts of things. So we have to, at least when we're having this conversation about literacy can't start and end on the same trajectory for everyone.
No.
So then correct. So then for the ones who would deviate from this trajectory, we must have a separate system.
But we must also put a system in place to reduce the number of children who end up on that track.
I thought that system was the school. I thought that was what the system, I thought that system was the school.
Yes. Yes.
So then perhaps maybe one of the suggestions that we can look at is, now I am not an advocate nor a fan of the SEA exam. I am full support of the continuous assessment type style programs, what they used to call CAC, continuous assessment. How do we fit reading into something? Let's imagine for a minute that never happens. Continuous assessment is thrown out the window. It never comes to fruition. How do we include reading into SEA? How do we make reading? And when I say reading here, I'm not just talking about an essay and so on or whatever. Can it be feasible for us to actively have an actual reading component? Where children actively have to read for someone else to hear.
Oh, that's only fluency, and that does not mean that the child understands what he's reading. And I said earlier on, the whole purpose of reading is to understand what you read and to take action. So the only way one of the main ways, I should say, to measure that would be through comprehension. So the child gets an exercise and he's asked questions of varying levels, because just as I told you, reading consists of several components. Reading comprehension also consists of several levels. And so if the child is asked questions at the various levels of comprehension, that tells us what's happening in the head of the child as he reads.
So if through that we're able to find out what's going on in the head of the child, then perhaps shouldn't we hold on to them until what's happening in the mind of the child matches a secondary school type experience?
Perhaps, but that is for the administrators to deal with.
Lovely avoidance. Politician in the making. All right.
Yes,
now, we're looking to close. We're just about out of time. I know the conversation was a very fruitful one. If there was one thing you wanted the persons at home who are listening, watching us this morning, at home to leave with, maybe they have a child or are aware of a child, a teenager, or maybe a primary school child perhaps, a tween perhaps, or a teen, who's having challenges with reading, with literacy, and are too embarrassed to have it addressed. What should they do? What would you leave them with? What parting words?
Well, that child needs to be tested, one. That child needs to be encouraged to read and do it in interesting ways that don't say to the child, you're silly, you can't read. So maybe you all view a movie together and you discuss the movie, because in that way you begin to think critically, which is what you want to achieve at the end of all of this reading story. You want the child to be able to think critically. So discuss books with your child, discuss movies that you've looked at, you read the comics, what do you think is going to happen in the next part of the comics, and so on. So that I think the parent, apart from getting the child tested, the parent has a very active role to play by just encouraging all the language skills, because reading is language. So encouraging all the language-based activities. You're going to the grocery, what are we going to buy? You make a shopping list. Simple things, and it's going to help the child.
So it's the simple, everyday things that a parent can do to encourage your child.
Yes.
The simple, everyday things. I like that. Not too complicated. It doesn't have to be complex. It doesn't have to be these big textbooks. It could be simple things like a grocery list. It's the simple, the simple things.
Simple things, yeah.
All right. So for those of you at home, I say don't lose hope. It's the simple things that can make a difference when your child's reading. And of course, a reading child is a child who has access to the future and is self-sufficient. Until next week, please God. Same time, same place, right here on WESN. Mother, thank you very much for being here with me.
You're quite welcome.
Right here on WESN. Still giving her no grandchildren. It's Sule A. Joseph signing out. Stay psyched.
You're ridiculous.
We are WESN, the premier platform for Caribbean content. WESN, covering West, East, South, and North. WESN, we entertainment, sports, and news. WESN, available on Greendot 7, Amplia 118, Airlink 17, Bmobile 107, Digicel 21, ICNTT 105, and Flow 110. Connect with us at WESNCC or stream online at www.wesncc.com. WESN, your premier platform for Caribbean content.
What's the best way to grab the attention of viewers?
Please exercise more patience. You have to be kidding me.
Doing what we do best.
I'll say at the very least it's a conspiracy of laziness against the people.
Join me, Keaton Shaw.
And me, Sean Michael Small, for Talking Point.
Weekdays from 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m.
We go in-depth on the trending issues and engage the most controversial newsmakers
as we get them to account to the people for their actions.
You can't go to the government with nothing. You can't go to cabinet with an empty hand, with a wish.
I'm glad that we're having this a sober, mature discussion.
In the present situation, I expect a continuation of the chaos.
Join us for the discussion, Mondays to Fridays,
only on WESN,
the content capital.
People really want to know, what about me? Where do I fit? Yes. What is in the ride for me in terms of a better Trinidad and Tobago? And I'm pleased to shed some light on that.
The purpose of bail is to ensure your attendance at court. That's it. It is not punitive, it is not rehabilitative.
We the police officers, we are professional, and we are here for whenever the survivor is ready to come forward.
We have the right to private and family life, the right to religious freedoms and beliefs and thoughts and expression. But these rights are not absolute. Certain rights can be limited.
The law is to govern the whole, it's for all of us in public.
Did you tell your hubby about it, first of all?
I did.
When you were telling him, did you think that he was going to think differently of you or less of you?
I thought exactly that.
In case you've missed it, it's an encore of Nicole Larson Live. Relive some of the riveting experiences of everyday people who candidly shared with me their stories, life challenges, stories of hope, and eventual victories.
Because he is not like man, because he is the God. It is a promise that we can hold on to.
The report came back that she had two properly...
Eric, behave yourself, no man.
Two properly working kidneys.
An encore of Nicole Larson Live, living in victory every day. Airing on WESN, the content capital, on Sunday, July 2nd at 8 p.m. Don't you miss it.
Join me, Dr. Nalini Kokram, on What's Up Doc, where we discuss all your burning questions concerning health.
Trinidad and Tobago is among one of the highest risk group of patients that develop this form of genetic breast cancer.
What I'd like to take home from a short interview like this: screening. You must screen.
Because it's silent.
It's silent.
Yeah.
And because it's silent, you don't know it's there.
What's Up Doc, every Tuesday and Thursday on WESN, Content Capital.
Take some time for yourself or spend some time with the family at Sandy Point Village Hotel. Enjoy our various studio and suite apartments, self-contained with their own kitchenettes and Wi-Fi. We also have our famous 100-foot swimming pool and our beachfront restaurant, the Steak and Lobster Grill. And our location in Crown Point puts us near the center of activity, from the nylon pool to the local nightlife. Call us and make your reservations at 639-8533, 389-2378, or email us at sandypointvillagehotel@gmail.com.